This is an ODB Films production. Visit odbfilms.com today.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This show is all about growing in our understanding and practice of faith. Past episodes are available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Tuke, the Director of Ministry at ODB Films, and today is a long-awaited show. We're going to talk about military chaplains. I had the blessing of working with Monsignor Donald Shea, Brigadier General Donald Shea, the former chief chaplain of all chaplains during the Clinton administration in the 90s, who retired in the Diocese of Helena and then got assigned out to John Paul II Big Fork parish, where I was managing a multi-parish ministry. And he's just, quite frankly, one of the most extraordinary men I've ever met. I'll talk a little bit about him at the end of the show. But this has been a show I've wanted to do forever because I think a lot of Catholics don't actually know what a chaplain does and the challenges that they face in doing it. And I am excited to share this incredible witness. So here's what you need to know. Military chaplains are part of what are called military ordinariates, which is actually a really unique setup within the Catholic Church. So a military ordinariate is like a diocese, but it doesn't cover like a geographical area like a typical diocese does. So it's headed by a bishop. It's responsible for the spiritual care of Catholics serving in the armed forces of a country wherever they are assigned, be it on a military base, at home, or abroad, a Navy ship, international peacekeeping missions, and so on. So while most military chaplains are given basic military training, they are usually unarmed, and their main goals are to keep the morale of the troops high, to support the troops, sometimes their loved ones, through really tough times. Although there are a lot of stories that you're going to hear today about incredible chaplains. So they don't restrict their ministry to just Catholics either. They're available to whoever may need pastoral care or spiritual guidance, not unlike what a pastor at a parish is supposed to be. Everybody in the parish, not just Catholics. They often serve men and women who never go to church, but are comforted just merely by the fact that there is someone praying for them as they head out the door into an armed conflict. Undoubtedly, a military chaplain's job is just tough. On one hand, they're trying to facilitate worship in places where there's a lot of different belief systems and lots of different levels of faith. And on the other hand, they have to try to be a pillar of strength, hope, light in situations that just absolutely defy reason. In a lot of instances, they have to dig very deep as they stand by grieving family members and friends of fallen soldiers. So while the techniques for military combat have changed a lot over the years, there's a bunch of diaries of priests, even from recent wars, that speak of how they have had to move through battlefields to comfort and anoint dying soldiers. And even today, a military chaplain's role can put him in harm's way, or at the very least, make him a target of enemy combatants. So during the recent Iraqi war, there were reports that Iraqi insurgent snipers were actually encouraged to target chaplains along with medical personnel and engineers under the assumption that their deaths would demoralize entire units. Think about that. That's amazing. Yet, despite all of that, military chaplains all over the world, they continue to carry out their duties faithfully and bravely. Unbelievable. So we'll do a little bit of history and we'll tell some specific testimonies of these incredible leaders. You're going to learn a ton today. This is pretty exciting. So in the U.S., military chaplains have been serving since the Revolutionary War. The use of Catholic chaplains didn't really begin until the Civil War, specifically after large populations of Catholic immigrants had changed really the demographic of a pretty much a previously Protestant-dominated America. So even before the Civil War, during the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, Father Anthony Ray served in the army of General Zachary Taylor. Father Ray administered to American troops with last rites and care for the wounded. He was present at the Battle of Monterrey, in which he earned admiration for his bravery. Father Ray also ministered to local Mexican Catholics. He was warned by U.S. Army officers against this practice due to guerrilla and bandit activity outside U.S. camps. However, he said, whatever. He said, forget it. He accepted the risk and worked for these good men. He died doing the work of our Lord in 1847 in the Mexican countryside, being found dead of multiple lance pierces. What an amazing guy. During the U.S. Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, Father William Corby became famous for his absolution of the Irish Brigade at Gettysburg 1863. They went into battle. Shortly after offering absolution, a lot of Irish soldiers were killed. But in the mercy of the Lord, they died with the sacramental comfort of the Holy Church, which is pretty incredible. So this act is still it's commemorated by a statue of the absolution at Gettysburg National Battlefield. So you can go see that if you ever visit. Father Corby later became president of Notre Dame, and he wrote a memoir of his 3 years in the Civil War, which is still in print, called Memories of a Chaplain Life. Amazing stuff. Also during the Civil War, Father Peter Whelan, Whelan, he was a Confederate Army Catholic chaplain who ministered to the Union prisoners at the infamous Andersonville Prisoner of War Camp, POW camp, in Georgia. And there, the prisoners were exposed at all times and in all seasons. So the stream that flowed through the camp was their water source, and it was also the latrine. Unbelievably awful living situation. So Father Whelan administered to the prisoners in the hot, disease-ridden, just gross camp where a lot of people died. Prisoners also suffered from gang violence committed by other prisoners. Amazing stuff. So from dawn to dusk, Father Whelan heard confessions, cared for the sick, and he provided a lot of comfort, including the last rites, to a lot of folks who died. It was actually in this camp that was just known for being horrific that Father Whelan saved thousands of lives and souls through just his zeal for charity. He's an amazing guy. He cared for those seen as the kind of the Union enemy, but he saw them as humans first, his brothers first and foremost. He contracted a lung disease from disease-ridden the camp itself, and he died in 1871. During World War I, you might recognize some of these names because they're quite a bit more famous. Father John B. D. Vallis would become known as the Angel of the Trenches. You got to remember just the amount of casualties in World War I. Just unbelievable, right? And this was due to his charity, and basically he would deliberately enter into no man's land, that gap between the trenches, and look for wounded and dying soldiers, Allied or German. It didn't matter. So the danger, the risk, his just zeal for humans made him an absolute legend. In fact, he was even found unconscious due to breathing in mustard gas while trying to aid a wounded soldier. His selfless charity, just unbelievable. It led to he died early from health problems connected to the war at the age of 41, but world famous chaplain, amazing. Father Francis Patrick Duffy, also a legend and known for his chaplaincy to the 69th Fighting Irish New York National Guard in World War I. Today, while not super well known, there's a statue of Father Duffy. It can be found in the middle of Times Square. It's amazing. You can see it. It's kind of hidden in a lot of photos because people don't realize why it's there, but that's him. What a stud. So the attack on Pearl Harbor actually brought about the first Catholic chaplain hero of World War II. Father Aloysius Schmidt was beginning preparations for Mass on the USS Oklahoma when Japanese torpedoes hit the battleship. And the attack actually caused a lot of flooding aboard the vessel. And in one compartment, Father Schmidt helped push sailors through a small porthole to escape all that water that was just rushing in. Unbelievable. So the last man to leave would have been Father Schmidt. However, after realizing that more sailors had arrived into the flooding compartment below him, he went back and he gave up attempts to save himself. Amazing. So Father Schmidt pushed another 12 guys through this small portal before he drowned. And later in the war, a Navy destroyer would bear his name as the USS Schmidt. That's incredible. So in the following days, the Japanese attacks on the Philippines also brought out a lot more Catholic priest heroes. Father William Cummings was one of these. He ministered to the victims of the attacks on the Philippines. Eventually, he was captured. Father Cummings was one of the 5 priests who participated in the infamous Bataan Death March. Father Cummings would continue to minister to troops in that POW camp and became known as the man who never said no to anybody. So Father Cummings, he died on a Japanese POW ship in the same war. Also on the Death March, the Japanese brutally murdered a Jesuit priest who until today is regarded as a martyr by the Filipino people. Father Juan Gaerlan, Gaerlan, was a chaplain to the Philippine Army. At the time, the Philippines was still an American colony. You got to remember that. He escaped with other Filipino soldiers, but he was later recaptured. And in retaliation, all of them were fastened to baling wire, and they were killed publicly. So amazing, amazing guy. Father John E. Duffy would survive the death march, being left for dead after Japanese guards stabbed him. But rescued by Filipino guerrilla, he was later recaptured and sent to Japanese POW camps where he ministered to the prisoners. And during his imprisonment there, Father Duffy was tortured. He was beaten with a bat, subjected to high water pressure, and all of those things did not convince him to collaborate with the enemy in any way. Amazing guy. Father Duffy was also with Father Matthias Zerfus, who survived the death march also. And while a prisoner, he celebrated Mass, cared for the sick, even though he was really weak himself. Kind of reminds you of that St. Francis of Assisi, just frail guy, just doing everything he can. I mean, he was starving to death. Father Zerfus even conducted convert classes and led night prayers and a daily rosary. This guy eventually died after being given last rites by Father Duffy when their POW ship moving them was mistakenly attacked by U.S. warplanes. Oh my gosh, right? Father Karl Hausmann also ministered to POWs after surviving the death march. He entered the army following the attack on the Philippines, as he was already present in the islands and was already a priest that was ministering to the lepers at the Colion, 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 looks like Colion, but it's not pronounced that way. Was a leper colony in the area. So one survivor noted that they felt unclean around Father Hausmann as he was so unbelievably holy. A lot of that has come out of the diaries and testimonies that we found. Another example of this holiness was he would give food to other prisoners, although he himself was dying of starvation. And another was how he worked for others while barely able to even stand by himself. Just an absolute servant, just incredible, right? He suffered a horrific beating by a Japanese guard for he refused to stop the consecration during Mass when an air raid began. Isn't that amazing? So Father Hausmann survived that beating and still completed the Holy Mass after the guard left. Father Duffy himself said Father Hausmann died partly because he gave his daily 2 spoonfuls of rice to other prisoners. He was just so dedicated. Unbelievable. So as World War II continued, lots of Catholic chaplains entered military service and began to bring the sacraments that were just so needed for soldiers in danger and on the verge of death. And a lot of them would give their lives in heroic sacrifice. In the Pacific, Father Thomas Reardon suffered with the troops on Guadalcanal. Unbelievable. Author James Campbell, he wrote in a book, In the Ghost Mountain Boys, talking about a campaign in New Guinea. He talks about a priest, Father Stephen Zenas, Dzienis, who accompanied the 32nd Infantry Division as it crossed the Owen Stanley Mountains in a 130-mile march through jungle. And the march, unbelievable. Just it killed a ton of people, but they still went into immediate combat for 2 months after getting where they needed to go. The Japanese just absolutely whomped them. And even in battle, and despite jungle rot sores, Father Zenas would provide mass, comfort, last rites. Soldiers of all different faiths were known to shout, "Chaplain Zenas is here," because his presence was just so important in terms of morale. And he called it his parish. You know, he would visit his parish, which meant the front lines. Unbelievable. At Iwo Jima, Marine Chaplain Father Charles Suver celebrated Holy Mass shortly before the raising of the U.S. flag on Mount Suribaki by the Marines. And there's a lot of debate. It's kind of inconclusive whether it was the first, the lesser known of the raising of the flags, or the second well-known one that led to the photo and the Iwo Jima statue that you can now see in D.C. But regardless which flag raising it was, Father Suver could still hear Japanese voices in nearby caves as he said the Mass before they raised the flag. How amazing is that? Of course, there were horrible fights at sea as well during World War II. Navy Chaplain Father Joseph O'Callaghan received the Medal of Honor due to his bravery administering to the dead and wounded when the aircraft carrier USS Franklin was severely damaged and then turned into this blazing inferno by a kamikaze attack. So Father O'Callaghan, he was credited with inspiring the crew to fight the fires despite all this awful danger of flames and American bombs on the plane being set off. He set an example. Father O'Callaghan set an example of bravery and total calmness, which really turned to inspire the crew and save a ton of lives. So amazing chaplain presence, well beyond sacraments, just incredible stuff. In Europe, Catholic chaplains were no less brave, and they were very present throughout the whole thing. Father Joseph Lacey spent a lot of D-Day in France providing last rites to Catholic soldiers and non-Catholic soldiers. Father Francis L. Sampson became known as the Parachute Padre, serving the 501st Parachute Regiment. He was captured at Normandy by the German SS and almost executed until saved by a German Catholic soldier. Isn't that amazing? So Father Sampson noted that he was so nervous, he just kept repeating the Catholic grace before a meal instead of an act of contrition. He was just panicking, right? So eventually, freed by American troops and given the Distinguished Service of the Cross, Father Sampson would go on to survive the infamous jump into the Arnhem Pocket in Holland, also known as the Bridge Too Far, and then was later recaptured by German troops during the Battle of the Bulge. Unbelievable. And this time, Father Sampson would remain in a POW camp till the end of the war, but remained very busy at the camp, aiding the sick and saying Mass. So Father Sampson would survive to serve as chaplain in the Korean War as well, and later become U.S. Army Chief of Chaplains, 1967 to 1971. He is quite the hero. Out at sea, battling in the Atlantic with German submarines, Father John Washington is remembered as one of the 4 chaplains that gave away their lives after the troop ship Dorchester was torpedoed by a U-boat. Father Washington and 3 other chaplains, a rabbi, a Methodist, and a Dutch Reform minister, all gave their life preservers and were last seen sinking with the ship, praying with arms linked for the men's safety. Isn't that an amazing image? And there's a stained glass memorial to these 4 guys in the Pentagon. Incredible. So in the post-war era, Father William Menster accompanied the U.S. exploration mission Operation High Jump to Antarctica. Father Menster would be the first clergy to set foot on Antarctica and also consecrate the continent through the Holy Mass, which is amazing. In 1950, the Korean War would bring forward even more sacrifice on the part of Catholic chaplains. It's a real famous one. Father Emile Capuan, Kapaun, who was declared a servant of God in 1993 and may one day be a saint. He worked tirelessly to aid and comfort POWs after he was captured and imprisoned by Chinese communist troops. Father Capuan, despite a lot of abuse, would always, he would help the Allied POWs just refute propaganda from the communists with Catholic doctrine, no less. And eventually, communist abuse would take its toll on Father Capuan. He would die of sickness, and he was denied medical care, of course. Starvation, all those things led to his death. He also gave away his food to other POWs, which made his death come that much quicker. In Vietnam, Father Vincent Robert Capodanno, a U.S. Navy chaplain, ministered to U.S. troops and was killed while trying to rescue a wounded corpsman. Unbelievable. Capodanno was into his 2nd year after he volunteered to extend past a year in order to continue to administer to U.S. troops, and this action would actually lead to the award of the Medal of Honor for Father Capodanno. He was named Servant of God in 2002 and may become a saint in our lifetime as well. Just incredible. U.S. Army Chaplain Father Aloysius Paul McConigal, during the Tet Offensive in 1968, volunteered to minister to troops in the urban battle for Hugh City. And this battle is one of the great urban battles like Stalingrad and Manila during World War II. It was intense. And despite an order to not go into the city, Father McConigal, he did anyway. He went in there. Once he got there, he linked up with some Marines. They told him to leave. It was too dangerous, and he refused. He ministered aid and last rites to the wounded and dying. He was killed on February 17th, 1968, trying to rescue a wounded Marine. The Marines later dedicated a chapel to him at Camp Pendleton in his honor for just his incredible service. And kind of in the more modern era, Father Tim Vakuk served in Bosnia, where he told his sister he wanted to do God's will, even if it included being in the line of fire. He deployed to Iraq. He drove in convoys that were always being targeted by IEDs, improvised explosive devices, but just to minister to the troops, incredible. So after returning from saying Mass in the Mosul area in 2004, Father Vakuk was in a vehicle struck by an IED that caused him to lose an eye and suffer a lot of brain damage. And he suffered during his attempts of recovery and passed away in 2009. Just a true warrior for Christ. Unbelievable. And listen, I know there's just no way in this podcast that we can cover everybody. We are just barely scratching the surface. But it's an amazing reminder of the many Catholic heroes that have served as chaplains in our country's history. But I would like you to remember one name in particular, and it's the dear friend I spoke about, my former boss and pastor, Monsignor Donald Shea. Butte, Montana born, and just the most outstanding leader of men that I have ever met. He was in Vietnam, just an unbelievable, incredible guy. Monsignor Shea went to a lot of places, Vietnam, South Korea, Panama, and all over Europe while serving with the Army Special Forces. He was known as the soldier who went into battle with no other weapon than a mass kit and a Bible. And by went into battle, I mean paratrooped into battle. He received a lot of decorations, medals, and badges, including a Purple Heart, 4 Bronze Stars, one of which is for valor. Monsignor Shea was a graduate of the U.S. Army War College and was appointed Army Chief of Chaplains in 1995. He served in that capacity at the Pentagon until he retired as a Major General in 1999. And I just have to tell you, I've worked with a lot of people in my lifetime. I've been around a lot of incredible leaders. And there's just, when you entered into a room with a man like this, you just understood how he inspired men. And he taught me everything I know about leadership. And I miss him. I miss him. He passed away not too long ago. It was the most beautiful funeral I have ever been to. It was not a full decorated military funeral. He insisted that it not be. He didn't want any of his parish in Big Fork, Montana to feel alienated from the ceremony. And so it was just this kind of gorgeous mixture of military and small town Montana community. And we are thankful for his incredible service. Military chaplains, amazing, unbelievably challenging, but unbelievable heroes, bringing the power of the healing of the sacraments to the front lines of war. We are thankful for their incredible service. So we hope that you learned a little bit more today about them, and I hope that you come to remember them on Memorial Day and Veterans Day and just the great gifts that they've brought to us in the name of the church. Thanks for listening. Sincerely, we're partners in the journey of faith. I hope you will share the Renovo podcast with friends and foes. Send your topic suggestions, questions, and/or comments to doug@odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.